China's rights and interests in the Bay of Bengal, in accordance with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. China has some maritime rights and interests as other states in the Bay of Bengal. First, the safety and security of navigation, including safety of navigation in Malacca Strait, and China has been invested in the later stages of the Bay of Bengal. For example, China has invested in the Sino-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines, and so on. And China main trade routes through the Bay of Bengal, including the Malacca Strait. And the Sino-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines from the port of Myanmar to Yunnan province. Also, China has marine fisheries and resources rights. And in accordance with the international law, China has rights to fish in the high seas and exclusive economic zones of the coastal states on some conditions. And China has rights to marine scientific research. In fact, China has conducted some marine scientific research, and China has a block of mineral resources in the Indian Ocean, which has been authorized by International Seabed Authority. And China's major concern on jurisdictional security in the Bay of Bengal. First of all, as we all know, that the strategy of the US of the return to Asia has some impacts in the region. For instance, recently Myanmar's president called a halt to the ongoing hydroelectric dams invested and constructed by China. And there is speculations that the US is behind the scenes. And China also concerned about the foreign military control of the sea lands in the Bay of Bengal. And China also concerned about India's string of pearls, or the Iron Curtain, aiming at military control of the west end of the Malacca Strait. This is not only the speculation of the Chinese side, but some foreign military analysis, including some military analysis in Singapore, have such speculations. And it is said that China tried to build a string of berths in the Indian Ocean. However, now it is India that tries to build a string of berths against other countries in Indian Ocean. This is the main sea lands connected with the Middle East and China. And it is speculated that China built some facilities along some coastal states in the Bay of Bengal and other parts of Indian Ocean. And it is called the String of Pearls. And India plans to increase security infrastructure and military presence in the Lake Chain and the Ahmed and Nicobar Islands in order to strengthen military control of the sea lanes, especially the Malacca Strait. And this is the island chains, especially this one that controls the west end of the Malacca Strait. India plans to invest much and strengthen its military facilities and station more troops in these island chains to control the sea lanes. And in non-traditional security threats, as we all know that the pilots and arms robberies in the Indian Ocean, including the Bay of Bengal, has become a major concern of international community, and China is one of the victims of the piracy. And there are also organized transnational crimes in this region. And as we know that, and some other speakers also mentioned that maritime terrorism in this area is also a major concern. And what do? We need international cooperation, including in the Bay of Bengal. And we need to strengthen international cooperation in the maintenance of peace and security in the Bay. It is in the interest of every country, including China. For example, China involves in international anti-piracy cooperation in the Gulf of Aden. And also, China participates in the international cooperation mechanism in anti-piracy in the Malacca Strait. China is a party to the RCAP, that is, the Regional Cooperation Agreement on combating piracy and armed robberies against ships in Asia. And unfortunately, two major states, Indonesia and Malaysia, are not parties to RCAP. And it is a major deficiency of the RCAP mechanisms. And as we know, recently 13 Chinese crews were killed by the Thai soldiers in the Mekong River. And after that, China and Thailand, Myanmar, and Laos have reached an agreement to strengthen the maintenance of peace and security in the Mekong River. They agreed to have joint patrol of the Mekong River to safeguard the security and safety of navigation in the region. And in order to strengthen safety and security of navigation in the region, including the Bay of Bengal, and the countries concerned need to develop maritime confidence building measures, especially between China and the little states, especially India. And I think this is conducive to the peace and security in the region. As we know that China and India has some cooperation in anti-piracy in the Gulf of Aden. And we hope that China and India and other little states can also have cooperation in anti-piracy search and rescue, and marine scientific research in Indian Ocean, including the Bay of Bengal. Thank you.
Sir, in view of the recent incidents of fishermen from the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu being attacked by the personnel from the Sri Lankan Navy, could you please enlighten the House on exactly what is happening in the Pork Straits? Or could this end up be another flashpoint in Indo-Sri Lankan relations? And I've got another question. Recently, I read in the Hindu about Vietnam approaching India for wide-scale military assistance due to its conflict in the South China Sea. And India apparently seems to be in a spot as to how much it could help Vietnam. Now, pertaining to this issue on the Spratly Islands, in the event Philippines or Vietnam approaches India for military assistance, what will India's approach be? Thank you.
India's looking east policy was announced in 1992, and that was mainly about business, and it was towards Japan. Nowadays, there is not much mention of that policy, that looking east policy and business with Japan. Why is that so?
Dr. Chaudhary.
Iftikhar Chaudhary, ISAS. Question directed at Professor Imtiaz, but anyone can, of course, from the panel is welcome to respond. Sam Bateman, who's a local strategist in Singapore-based, an ex-naval officer of the Australian Navy, he refers to the Bay of Bengal as the potentially the most volatile region in part of the region. This is largely because of the undemarcated maritime boundaries. Now, very soon, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar will have to report to the United Nations on their claimed maritime territories. Is there any possibility, and this is something that we'd like to see, some kind of a trilateral understanding prior to presentation before UNCLOS? The incident that you refer to in November 2008, at that point in time, my responsibility was foreign affairs, but there was no defense minister, so I was also in charge of defense. You will recall that, there was an ultimatum given to Myanmar, but that by 0000 hours, we would take out the rig. And it was the Chinese intervention later in the evening of the 12th of November that prevented that thing from spiraling out of control. And that intervention, of course, came through our submissions to Beijing through the day. But anyway, is there some possibility of some kind of a trilateral understanding, given the fact that a reasonable goodwill exists on all three countries now towards one another before the presentation is made to the United Nations? A course of action that we would recommend. Thank you.
In 1990, at that time, Japan was seen as the beacon for investment, for technical skills, technology transfer, etc., etc. And as a result, ASEAN itself hitched to Japan for its own development. Then came the Indian approach to look east. And so I think it's only natural that this is happening. And India, in fact, there is a book by Sunanda Datta Ray, Look East to Look West. So we have come one circle by looking east. We have now become global in approach.
I've got a few questions which I'll give very short answers. One is fishermen from Sri Lanka. Undoubtedly, for the information of those who are not aware, India and Sri Lanka are separated by 26 miles of water, and a lot of Indian fishermen from the southern coast head out for fishing every day. Sadly for Sri Lanka, all the good fish are to be found in Sri Lankan waters. So these guys fetch up in the Sri Lankan territory and have been doing that for hundreds of years. And India and Sri Lanka have some arrangement between themselves. The maritime boundary is demarcated, but there are some place that, okay, fishermen can dry their nets at a certain island, which is with the Sri Lankans. Off and on there are instances where the security forces of Sri Lanka, including Sri Lankan Navy, has said, who interfere, chase down these guys, occasionally arrest them. 1 or 2 have been killed, and that is a problem which we have to resolve. I'm not sure it is such a problem which we cannot resolve through mutual dialogue and discussion. I would not say that the situation is hugely tense, but it definitely requires resolution. But the best course of action is for you to send all your fish towards the Indian coast, and that will not get the Indian fishermen into Sri Lankan waters. But unfortunately, that is not to happen. Regarding Vietnam and military assistance, actually, India has been, in a very, very, very small way, supplying arms, mainly small arms, to the countries which want to buy them from India, and Vietnam is one of them. Vietnam is sourcing some submarines to come from the Russian source. Since India operates the same kind of submarines, they have asked for some training assistance, as have some other countries of different things. Malaysians asked at one time for the MiG-29 aeroplanes and so on, and that might be provided because India's relations with Vietnam are very good. And whether India will provide military assistance to Vietnam's problems with China and South China Sea, I think that is highly unlikely. Even if India wished to, the resources are not there to do so. In any event, India, I don't think, wishes to get involved in any military scene in South China Sea. As far as Japan is concerned, it is very much a part of India's low-East policy. We have very many mutual interests. Japanese bilateral trade with India is increasing every day. Japan has important Indian Ocean interests, and India looks at its relationship with Japan in a very positive and proactive way. Maritime boundaries. You are so right. India and Bangladesh have a maritime boundary dispute, which in my view is utterly trivial. The sooner it is resolved, the better. We have 2 friendly governments in place in New Delhi and Dhaka, and I hope that is done as soon as possible. Our maritime boundary with Myanmar is resolved, so we don't have a Myanmar situation, only with Bangladesh, which is a very small thing. 2 other things I just want to mention. You know, India and China never had a border. Not many people realize it. India had a border with Tibet. It is only when Tibet was joined the Chinese Republic that India began to have a border with the Chinese. And the problem between China and India first began thereafter when the Dalai Lama fled to India and took refuge there. Until then, India and China never had a problem. There have been centuries of goodwill and bonhomie between the 2 countries. Finally, cooperative security in the Bay of Bengal region. Actually, as many people know, we have a cooperative maritime security meeting get-together in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands every 2 years. Last year that it was conducted, navies from Bangladesh, Myanmar, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, and delegations from Japan and Australia attended this cooperation. So it's a good idea, I agree with that.
Imtiaz?
Well, the option, I think, is becoming less and less because both India and Bangladesh have gone for international arbitration. Myanmar has already given its, whatever it wants to the international body. There are 2 things, in fact. One thing, I think, the statist mind has not, it's still there. It's entrenched, in fact. After all, we are all schooled in highly realistic kind of a, discourse. So I don't think they look beyond a statist perspective. And this reminds me of Mahabharata, actually, where Lord Brahma asked Yudhishthira, what is the greatest wonder? And Yudhishthira answered, and his answer was very interesting. He said, death strikes each day, but we live as if we were immortal. Now, all these leaders think that they are immortal. The day they would start thinking that they're mortal, probably the trilateral kind of thing probably would come up. But on a more serious note, I think it's high time that if China can be brought in to SAARC membership, and this is something that has come up very recently during the Maldives summit, I'm sure you're aware, and some key politicians from Bangladesh actually also pointed out. So now there is both academicians and researchers like us who have been talking for years that China ought to be brought in as a full member and not only just an observer. And even Myanmar, I think then you are in a situation where you can talk about a lot of these trilateral agreements. But I don't think the mindset is ready yet for that.
Dr. Wong?
I would like to make some comments and response to some answers. First of all, the China-India relation. China and India are the two major developing countries in the world and in this region. There is enough room for the two countries to cooperate, and the two countries also need to cooperate in this region. And I think economic development is the common concern and the most urgent task for China and India. So I think the two countries should cooperate rather than have involved in some disputes. For instance, the recent Indian-Vietnamese agreement on the oil and gas development in the South China Sea, I think it's not conducive to regional cooperation, as we note that there are disputes in the South China Sea, and the countries concerned, including China, are now discussing how to deal with these disputes. And because the disputes had been there for a long time, and there is historical problems, and it takes time to the countries concerned to resolve these issues. And China and the countries concerned have signed declaration on the Code of Conduct for the South China Sea in the year 2002, and in this July in Bali summit, China and ASEAN member states also signed a consensus on the implementation guidelines for the DOC. And recently, I mean the end of last month, China and Vietnam signed an agreement, I mean the legally binding agreements, to settle peacefully the existing maritime disputes between Vietnam and China. And China and Vietnam have settled their maritime disputes in the Bay of Beibu. Its English name is Bay of Tonkin in 2002, peacefully, bilaterally, and equally. So China and the countries concerned has the resolve and ability to deal with the South China Sea issue, and outsiders' involvement doesn't help. And I think India should not involve in the South China Sea by entering oil and gas developments in the disputed sea areas. Even the United States is very cautious about the South China Sea issue, and some American companies are also very cautious about oil and gas developments in the South China Sea. Why India? Some wise Indian strategic analysis have published some articles on this topic. They want India not to involve in the disputes of the South China Sea, on which the United States have also been very cautious. Why India? So that's my first comment. My second comment is about the military assistance from India to Vietnam and the Philippines. Just now I mentioned something about this, and I think the recent discussion of the arms sale, including sophisticated missiles made in India to sell to Vietnam, is also not conducive to the peace and security of the region. And the last comment I want to make is that the maritime boundaries of the Bay of Bengal, regarding the territory sea boundary and the boundaries of economic zone and outer and the continental shelf, it should be discussed, negotiated, and settled by the parties concerned. However, regarding the outer limit of the boundaries of the continental shelf, which exceed 200 nautical miles, it means the outer continental shelf should be submitted to the Commission on the Continental Shelf, established under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. This part of continental shelf cannot be settled or decided by the parties concerned. They must verify by the Commission on the Continental Shelf. Thank you.
Well, we'll take the second round of questions, but I wish to make a couple of very quick comments. One, I think Admiral Das mentioned about India-China. We do consider that India and China are new neighbors, which is 60-year-old. And earlier, whatever interaction happened between the two countries, of course there were direct visits and all that, but even Buddhism, for instance, went to China moderated by other factors. Therefore, it is the proximity which breeds contempt. And once you become very close, you start feeling both comfort and discomfort. And that's what it leads to. Therefore, you have centuries of peace because the direct interaction between the two countries really did not exist. To the extent it is generally perceived because of the last 6 years. And I think for analysis, we have to keep this in mind. Coming to India, Vietnam, the question is not of supplying item A, B, C, but in Vietnam security, India's interests go back to the mid-50s. And later on, some of the critical developments which took place need to be kept in mind. In 1979, for instance, when there was a punitive action on Vietnam by China, the Indian Foreign Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, was in Beijing. And he literally staged a walkout, taking this as an attack on Vietnam. And later on, for supporting Vietnam's right or wrong, I know in Asian assessment, in ASEAN's assessment, it was a wrong move on the part of Vietnam. But India supported Vietnam's position at the cost of losing its the full dialogue partner status with ASEAN, which was granted in May 1980. And from May 1980 to the beginning of the so-called present lookist policy, almost 10 years gap, largely because we took a position, India took a position on Vietnam. Therefore, one has to look at this relationship in perspective. Now, even oil and gas, India started exploring oil and gas in Vietnam way back in 1988, not now. And 1992, first agreement was signed between the two countries for the exploration of oil and gas. What actually has happened, and I'm sure Dr. Wong would clarify and make us understand the situation better, what has happened is that China has of late, I underline of late, included the South China Sea dispute as one of the core national interests of China, which earlier was not included, like Tibet or Taiwan, which were part of the core national interest. And as a result of that, and of course as a result of the Chinese growing capabilities, there is a greater reflection on the rights which, or the claims which are being perceived, which has led to this present tension in one form or the other. I think this is a perspective which we must keep it in mind. If need be, I'll have a couple of questions later, but not now. Let us go to the second round. Surya?
So there was some mention of India's quote-unquote string of pearls as a move against the so-called Chinese string of pearls. Could you elucidate more about that, and what are the steps which China is taking to counter this Indian string of pearls? Thank you.
Since history was evoked, I'm a historian. It's often distorted that India and China never had any problems in the past. 3 instances. In the 2nd century BCE, the Chinese would often change regimes in what is Gandhara, Kashmir area. In 648, the Chinese did a regime change in central India, middle India. In the 15th century, Cheng He, the great admiral, was involved in the internal dispute between Cochin and Calicut. I think contemporary political scientists usually don't focus on that and see the relations between India and China as all peaceful. I think that needs to be reviewed in the context. So please, as a request from a historian, please don't distort the history. My question to Professor Wang is, you spoke about the rights China has in Bay of Bengal. The oil exploration with Myanmar is fine. How about the rights of other countries in South China Sea? Does India or any other country have any rights in South China Sea under the UN Convention, or is it up to China to decide what other countries have rights in South China Sea? Thank you.
Anyone else? No. May I add to what Dr. Tan Sen Sen has said? What is your position, and as you are a legal expert, you will explain to us, on the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea of 1982? Because that seems to be at the root of the South China Sea dispute. There are different perspectives, both in the region and so far as China is concerned. Why it is that the line drawn by China, when actually this line came, how it came, and why it is that this has become a major bone of contention. The second is about, let us not, I'm not in favor of using the string of pearls. As Admiral said very rightly, it is a Pentagon term. And unfortunately and foolishly, I would say, many of the Indian strategic analysts first adopted it because it looked very great to them and good of expression. And I am sorry to learn that this is now being used even in China as a contrary to. Let us shed off this term. This is not our term. I do believe that some of the port development activities of China in Sitwe, in Gwadar, in Hambantota, wherever, I see this more as a defensive, as a necessary commercial activity because of the trade growing there. But the problem which has arisen is of now the Gwadar facility being also used for naval purposes, which raises doubts. At the moment, I don't believe that Hambantota or Sitwe have very heavy military facilities, not at all. But since in Gwadar situation seems to be changing, the fear arises that it might happen here, there, everywhere else. I wonder if you would like to comment on that. Any other no? Okay.
Okay, thank you
will
for,
start and then we'll go to others.
Thank you for your questions. First of all, regarding the string of pearls, China is now building some facilities in the ports of some coastal states in the Indian Ocean, including the Bay of Bengal. It's a fact. But I think it is for economic purpose. As we know that China's bilateral trades and economic cooperation with the countries concerned have increasing rapidly. So we need to strengthen our trade routes, especially the security and safety of navigation. As we note, if we go through Myanmar and Pakistan, it should be much, much shorter. The shipping route should be shorter than through Malacca Strait. So from an economic point of view, it's a cost-effective way. And I think it's good for the local economy and the living standard of the people, because it's helpful to the local economy of these little states. I don't think it has much military implication. Second issue, regarding some histories of China and other countries, I think, including the border disputes between China and India, is something live in history. What India and China and other countries do is to recognize the history and look forward and negotiate equally, peacefully, and settle the disputes. If we cannot settle these disputes, we can have some joint developments and jointly maintain the peace and security in the region. And third, regarding China's rights in Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal, under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which was concluded in 1982, China and other countries, I mean the parties to the convention, and I have to remind you that the United States has not ratified the convention. Right now, there are more than 150 states have ratified the convention. The United States is among the few states which have not ratified the convention. The major concern of the United States is that the convention has some provisions and regimes that restrict the coastal states to extend too much into the high seas, and the International Seabed Authority, which are provided by the convention as the common heritage of mankind. And as other international conventions, the Law of the Sea Convention also have some provisions which provides the obligations while conferring rights to the parties concerned. So the United States that think that the convention has too much restrictions, so it has not ratified the convention. And regarding the rights of China and other countries in the Bay of Bengal, I should say that in accordance with the provisions of the convention, other states have rights to freedom of navigation, overflight, laying of pipelines on the seabed, and scientific research, and on some conditions, fishing rights in the high seas and international seabed area, and the exclusive economic zone and coastal and continental shelf on the coastal states. These are the rights provided in the convention. And China has obviously, and other countries, together with other countries, have such rights. And China have exercised these rights in history in this area. For example, China has been authorized by the International Seabed Authority, a piece of
yes, I know, for
mineral
for
resources.
undersea exploration.
International seabed.
Yes, that is true, but it's a question of territorial claims so far as Spartlays are concerned.
No, it is not within the national jurisdiction of any country. It's international seabed, which does not belong to any country.
Yes, there is no dispute there. That's not the
India also has.
Yes, of course, I know.
Has mineral resources.
There is no dispute on that issue.
No dispute. And regarding...
The dispute is on Spratly Islands and South China Sea.
So I will come to this topic now. Regarding the South China Sea disputes, first, it's caused by history. You mentioned the 9 dotted line. It was promulgated by the then Chinese government in 1947. In 1947, as we know that the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea was concluded in 1982, but that 9 dotted line was created in 1947. It means that in 1947, there were no the concept of exclusive economic zone, continental shelf. No, we don't have such kind of concepts at that time. So it means that the 9 dotted line was created before the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So it's historical issues. We should recognize the history, and in the recent Sino-Vietnamese agreement on the maritime issues, which was concluded on November the 11th, during the Vietnamese Communist Party chief visit China. He had a meeting with Chinese President Hu Jintao. After their meeting, China and Vietnam signed the legally binding agreement. There is some important points at the agreement. First, both sides recognize history in the South China Sea. It means that Vietnam also recognized that the 9 dotted line was concluded in 1940s. So it's a fact, it's a history. We have to discuss this. And also, both sides respect the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, of which both are parties. They have reached agreements. Okay, one final point. China and Vietnam negotiate, agree and peacefully on the Gulf of Tonkin of the maritime boundaries. It is a very successful negotiation, and they reached an agreement. And under the agreement, Vietnam got 53% of the waters, maritime space in the Gulf. And Vietnam also got the islands which belonged to China before. That island belonged to China before 1950s. But during the war, Vietnam War, China supported Vietnam and give that island to Vietnam as a military base against the US invasion. After that, China also recognized this history and recognized that island now belongs to China, to Vietnam in the agreement. So it means that China and Vietnam and other parties concerned have the resolve and the ability to settle the South China Sea issue without the intervention and assistance of the other countries. Thank you.
Anybody else wants to on the panel?
Just will be very brief. UNCLOS. India follows every single sentence and word of UNCLOS. Whether it's in Bay of Bengal, whether it's in Arabian Sea, whether it's in South China Sea, whether it's in East China Sea. That is the first clarification I want to give. It is not that one area is different and the other area is different. Two, India is full of poets and bards who coin good terms, but unfortunately coining a term like string of pearls was beyond our capabilities and competence, and we never framed it. Are we trying to do some string of pearls to China? You know, it is like telling Popeye to do something around King Kong. And that is neither a feasibility nor something what Popeye would desire. There is no desire on India's part to form any string of pearls around anybody. It is certainly India's desire to look after its national interests. That is one. And finally, I would simply say that India's friendship with Vietnam goes back to Ho Chi Minh, who was a great friend of our Prime Minister through those days, as he indeed was of Chairman Mao. So Vietnam has been a friendly country, is a friendly country, and as Professor Muni says, that oil companies' collaborative program there has been going on for 22 years now.
From the time that China embarked on its Look South policy, relations between Southeast Asia and China have gone from strength to strength. Unfortunately, the last 4 years have seen some signs of unease, and it's principally on the South China Sea. So I think it's in everybody's interest that this issue be put to rest. And Professor Muni's point is very interesting. There cannot be core issues, or core interest issues, particularly on the South China Sea, because it's international waterways and everybody has a claim for navigational rights and other rights. Thank you.
Any other question, please? Quick one. No long statement. Yes.
Yeah, I noticed that the theme of this conference was on South Asia and Southeast Asia engagements. I think we shouldn't spend too much time on India and China.
Well, in Bay of Bengal, both India and China meet. You can't avoid them. If they are interacting with each other, engaging with each other, we have to take note of that. Any other question? Very quick, please.
Okay, just a very quick one. We've all talked about India versus China, and I think Nehru in the 40s wanted to talk about Hindi Chini bye bye, right? Unity. Now, just as a very quick thought, would you say that it's the ASEAN countries who have an interest in seeing a little bit of tension between India and China? Because a unified...
Little bit of?
As a little bit of tension between India and China. Because a unified India and a unified China, the fear is they'll probably suck up all the FDI.
I think ASEAN countries would like to see between India and China not bye-bye, buy-bye. Purchasing, shopping, not BYE, but anyone else? Well, Dr. Wong would like to respond to them, and I might add to your response something else.
Two quick points.
Just a minute. I want to add, you can wrap it up. You may have the last word on the subject. You know, when on November 11, you were referring to an agreement between a Vietnamese leader and he visited Beijing. At the same time, almost at the same time, the Vietnamese president was in New Delhi. And he signed an agreement to let India explore oil and gas in Vietnam coast, exactly at the same time, saying that the blocks which we are giving to India for exploration belongs to us under the UN Convention of 1982. On joint development, I have studied China's border agreement with Vietnam, which 1990-2000 it was concluded. And I asked some of the Vietnamese generals as to why you don't accept the Chinese proposal of joint development in the disputed areas. In fact, I mentioned that, look, India and China have a disputed border, but we have started cooperating on economic issues. And I quote the answer of the Vietnamese general. He said, it is like somebody inviting me for a dinner after snatching a $100 note from my pocket. So his contention was that the areas on which we are being invited to have joint development, according to us, belong to us. So why should there be a joint development at the behest of the others? But this is the view of the Vietnamese. Now, very quickly, because he says only 2 minutes are left, very quickly respond.
I'll respond to your comments and Vietnamese comments. The fact is that China provides huge of economic military aid to Vietnam in history and now. Recently, China provides billions of dollars to Vietnam during the financial crisis. Vietnam found their billions of dollars in his pocket from China, but not China taken from Vietnam. This first point. Second point, you recognize that the area that India and Vietnam oil and gas development area is a disputed area. You know it's the disputed area. Why do you still enter agreement with Vietnam? The second point. The third point, the terminology of string of pearls was created by the US Navy. And now the so-called Indian string of pearls was not created by Chinese, but other countries, including military analysis in Singapore and other countries, not in China. It's not made in China. The last point. The last point.
Yes.
The 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea has nothing to do with territorial disputes. So the convention alone cannot settle maritime disputes, especially islands disputes and other disputes. So that's why we mentioned we have to consider history and general international law, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. I think you will all agree with me that we have had a very, very lively session. And thanks to all the panelists who gave us their perspectives on this very sensitive region. I have some duties to perform.
I would like to invite Professor Muni to present tokens of appreciation to the panel of speakers, please. Ambassador K. Kesavapany. Retired Vice Admiral P.S. Das. Professor Imtiaz Ahmed. And Dr. Wang Hanling. Once again, on behalf of ISAS, I thank the panelists for their insightful sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now break for lunch. The buffet lunch is at Ocean Rooms 1 to 4 on level 2. Both vegetarian and non-vegetarian dishes are available. Please take the escalator outside the ballroom to level 2.